In our previous lecture, we learned about sliders and how the value of a slider can control other objects and their values within the applications. Now we're going to take this a step further and creating our fifth application of the course, and that is a temperature calculator. So how this is going to work is we have our slider and we can adjust a label which will display the weather in degrees within Fahrenheit. And as we're adjusting the slider to change that value of degrees in Fahrenheit, we'll have a second label converting that value of our Fahrenheit into Celsius. So as we increase the Fahrenheit, it will give us a calculation of Celsius, so we can find out the temperature in the calculation. So how we're going to do this is get two labels and a slider. So the first label is going to display our Fahrenheit. So make it quite big there, okay? And then we're going to put in our slider underneath, drag that out. And again, I'm going to copy and paste that label as it's already nice and centered and big enough. There we go. So this one is going to be our Fahrenheit. So if I type it out now, it's going to display it. Let's start with 50 Fahrenheit. There we go. And I'm not sure what that converts into just yet, but we'll find out within our label when we convert it in the Celsius. But for now, I'm just going to set it to 50 also Celsius, just so we can see how it's going to work. So as we increase and decrease this, it will change. So if we go to our assistant editor and create our actions and outlets for this within our viewcontroller.h, we're going to drag in an outlet for our label, and this will be our Fahrenheit label. There we go. And we do the same for our Celsius label. Again, naming this Celsius. There we go. We need an outlet for our slider as we need to determine the value. So we simply name this slider. And again, we need an action for it so we can perform it when we move it up and down, which we'll simply name slider action. There we go. Oh, making sure that it's changed from outlet to action. There we go. So connect that up, close down our assistant editor into our standard editor, and then jump into our viewcontroller.m. So again, how this is going to work is we're going to adjust our slider, which is then going to change the value of our Fahrenheit. As it's changing the value of our Fahrenheit, it's also going to be calculating that into Celsius and then displaying it in our second label. So what we're going to do first then is set it up to have the ability to change our Fahrenheit first. So we do self.Fahrenheit.text as we're going to adjust the Fahrenheit label first, and it's going to equal our simple ns string space alloc. After a bracket there, we do init with format. Now the reason we're doing this is because we're not only displaying the kind of output of our label into it, we're also displaying text along with it. So we need to create an ns string to convert it over. So we add symbol, two quotation marks, then we do a comma, space self.slider.value, in that with a bracket and a semicolon. And then from within our two quotation marks here, we're going to then put the percentage sign, the number 4.0 f, as this is then going to display our Fahrenheit. There we go. And the reason we're doing percentage sign 4.0 f is because we want it to display in a decimal place format. So as it stands at the moment, it's 4.0, so that's only going to display two numbers, and it's going to display no decimal place. We're going to use that anyway for when it displays it in Celsius, as we're going to need. So if I quickly go to build and run, just to kind of give you an example of what I mean by that, is as I decrease and increase, it's only got to set to 1. So if I quickly go back to our main.storyboard where we'll configure it. So if the minimum is going to be, let's say the minimum will be 0, and the maximum is going to be 200. We'll set the center as 100 and quickly build and run once more. As we increase and decrease, you can see now how it displays it with no decimal places. But as soon as we add the 1 onto it, like I just said before, change that to 1, that will give us a decimal place and convert, or change the conversions really. So you can see here we've got now 1 decimal place after it. So what we're going to do is keep that on, and then we're going to create our calculations. So what we're going to do is we're going to create 2 doubles. So we do double, and we'll name this Fahrenheit. Even though it's the same name, it won't affect it because it's not an outlet. Space equals space, and that's going to equal our self.slider.value. We're then going to create a second one. Space, making sure we got a semicolon on the end of that there. And this is going to be our Celsius. And that's going to equal a simple calculation. So our Celsius, or our Fahrenheit is going to equal the value of our slider, but our Celsius is going to equal, we'll do 2 brackets here, our Fahrenheit minus 32 divided by 1.8. Now this is the calculation to kind of convert our Fahrenheit into Celsius. So what we're going to do is create an NS string first, as we need to place it into a string before we can place it into our label. So again, we do NS string space asterisk, and I simply put in result space equals space bracket bracket NS string space alloc, as we need to allocate one. Then we do init with format, and do @ 2 quotation marks, and then we finish out with a comma, and then writing in Celsius, and then a bracket and a semicolon. And again, just like how we did up here, we're going to copy and paste that in. And obviously all we need to change is it displaying from Fahrenheit to Celsius. There we go. So from here, you could change it up. You could place in more decimal places, but placing in 2, 3, 4, depending on however you want to format it. But I'm going to keep in 1 as it is now. I might take off that one there and just keep it as 0. It's entirely up to you how you want to play with this. You can mess around with it yourself. But once we got that calculation added into a string, we can now get that string to display into our self.celsius.text is going to equal our simple result, and that with a semicolon. Okay, so if we go to build and run, and as we're testing it out, I'll explain the code more in depth. So we've got it set up here. It's first going to, when we adjust, change what we have in our Fahrenheit. So as you can see there, it changes it. So let's set it to, I don't know, 132. It then creates a double, or 2 doubles, as Fahrenheit is going to equal our slider value, which at the moment is 132. It then gets our Celsius, which is going to equal Fahrenheit minus 32, kind of divided by 1.8, which then gives us our calculation, which then places it within a string, and then that string result is then equal to the text feature of our second label. So as we increase and decrease this, we go all the way to the top, which displays it in Celsius, and decreases it all the way to the bottom, which again displays it in Celsius. Now the thing is, we set our Fahrenheit here to have 4.0f, which means it doesn't give us our decimal point after. As you can see, our 4.1 gives us our 1 decimal point. If we change that .1 to .2, it will give us 2 numbers after the decimal point. That 4 means it allows us to have 4 numbers before the decimal point. So if you change that to 1, it means it'll only display 1 number before the decimal point, and you change it higher after, it displays more numbers after. So that's how it sets up. The higher the number before the decimal point means how many numbers it displays. So if I now change this down to, let's say, 3, and build and run, you'll now see as I adjust it, we now have 3 numbers after the decimal point. So that's kind of how it works. So if I go back from there, we're going to jump straight into our main.storyboard, where we're going to add a nice kind of visual effect. Now, as you can see here, we have our minimum track tint and our maximum track tint. If I selected these and changed it, let's go with red on this one, and then change our second one to blue. And then what I mean by this is, if I go to build it and run, as I increase our temperature, when I get really to the top where it's really hot, it displays more of our red bar, our minimum there, and as I make the temperature more and more smaller or colder, it displays more of the blue, which says it's even colder. So it's a kind of a nice little visual effect for your users to look at. You can obviously change this however you like, but that's how you simply use the slider to not only control two outputs in terms of our two labels, but also create the conversion from one to another. So there we go, we've created our simple temperature calculator. You can take this one step further by adding fancier graphics. You can even switch it up and take away the slider as a complete all. And you could place in your own maybe UI text field where users could input their own text and then convert it themselves. So again, this is our 5th application on how to create a nice simple temperature calculator.